Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, AlbyMTG. For today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 decks that I would love to see get some sort of help in Modern Horizons. These are going to be decks that I'm really fond of in the Modern format, decks that are generally Tier 2, Tier 3, and are really only 1, maybe 2 cards away from making that jump up into being a little bit more competitive. And again, a lot of these are pet decks of mine, decks that I've played in the past, decks that I'm really fond of, and so they would be decks that I would really like to see get an additional piece or two from Modern Horizons. And I think that'd be pretty easy to get some of these additions in, and we're going to be talking about specifically what additions we might be able to see in Modern Horizons that could potentially influence these decks. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started here with a classic. We've got Modern Merfolk. Merfolk is just such a sweet deck. This was actually the first deck I played in Modern. I had originally, like most players, I just did drafts in Standard, but there was a Monday Night Modern that happened at my LGS, and I was always too scared to go to it. I thought the Modern players would be too intimidating because they would know everything about the format and I wouldn't know anything, and I ended up going one night because a friend said I could borrow a deck, and that deck happened to be Merfolk. I then proceeded to go for the next probably year and a half to basically every Modern Monday since, and I've been playing quite a lot of different decks now, but Merfolk always has a special place in my heart as the deck that got me into the Modern format, and first let me, cast some spells in the Modern format. It's a very sweet deck. For those of you that don't know Merfolk for some reason, it's a pretty common deck, so I feel like most of you know it, but it does rely on a bunch of cards with the creature type Merfolk, and then some Lord effects such as Master of the Pearl Trident, which says other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Island Walk, as well as the redundancy of Lord of Atlantis, which basically says the same thing. All Merfolk you control gain Island Walk, or actually no, this is all Merfolk gain Island Walk and get +1/+1. So Lord of Atlantis actually counts for your opponent's Merfolk too. Very irrelevant, almost never comes up, but it is technically the wording on the card. And then just some other sweet Merfolk that have some cool abilities. It got a new addition in Merfolk Trickster recently in Dominaria, and that was a big improvement to the deck because it adds something with Flash that we can do when we don't have our Aether Vial draw, something that we can still do on our opponent's turn, which is really nice. And then because you're blue, you have access to some sweet little interaction things like Vapor Snag, Deprive, Spell Snare, or Spell Pierce, those sort of cards. Not necessarily Spell Snare, more Spell Pierce was what I was going for. And then some Spreading Seas, again, little disruption, turns your opponent's lands into islands. Works fantastic then with the Lord of Atlantis and the Master of the Pearl Trident, which give your Merfolk Island Walk so they can get through for some great damage. This deck has a couple of problems. It can be very clunky at times. There will be times where you end up drawing several 2-drops and you don't have an Aether Vial, so you're stuck playing one spell a turn sometimes, and it can be a little bit awkward needing to sequence out your lords and things to get through the right amount of damage. Deck's a little bit weak to sweepers if you overextend, and it's a very sweet deck, but again is just really looking for some additional pieces. Right now at the 1-drop slot, there's a lot of contention for what the 1-drop slot should be. Obviously, Aether Vial is a big piece to the deck, but in terms of a creature, we've seen things like Benthic Biomancer, which is kind of like the main card now. We've seen cards in the past like Curse Catcher as well take over the 1-drop slot. And I think what the deck really needs would be a fantastic 1-drop. That would be a great thing for Modern Horizons to have. But really, any card with a relevant ability that could end up seeing Modern play that also has the creature typing of Merfolk could just be a big inclusion. Maybe even if it's a sideboard card. If it's a sideboard card that has the Merfolk subtyping but is very relevant to maybe the current Modern game, the Modern metagame. Another card that's been seeing play at the 1-drop slot has been Mistcaller from M19, which has been helping against the decks like Hollow One and these Dredge, Phoenix, decks that are trying to bring things back from the graveyard sort of strategies like those. So really, I think the Merfolk deck is super close to being playable. Nikachu MTG, fantastic YouTuber, plays nothing but Merfolk. Love watching his content as well, and seeing him play the deck all the time just really makes me want to re-sleeve up Merfolk. But I think it's about a piece or two away from really becoming the kind of deck that I want to start sleeving up again. But I really hope that Modern Horizons has something in store for Merfolk. Next deck we're going to take a look at here is, again, another personal favorite of mine. This is 8-Rack. This one, if you guys can recall from May. I think this was the last tournament report that I did with 8-Rack when I was still on 8-Rack. I switched over 8-Rack then to Green Black Rock, and I've switched on to some other decks since then, like Burn is what I'm currently on. But anyway, 8-Rack, again, this 8-Rack deck was the first time I had ever attended an event that wasn't at my local game store where I ended up top 8ing the event at competitive REL. So again, has kind of a special little placement in my heart that it was the first time I was able to do something like that. And again, I think the deck is kind of in a pretty good slot right now. Like, there's a lot of decks that really rely on having a set number of cards in order to do crazy things. Like Phoenix, sure, they can discard their Phoenixes for free, but they do need to cast 3 spells a turn, which can sometimes be pretty good when we're playing cards like Wrenchmind, as well as just the disruption of Inquisition of Kozilek, as well as Thoughtseize, cards like that. And then just being an ensnaring bridge deck against some of the creature decks in the format can be fine too. So I think A-Rack's actually in a pretty reasonable spot right now. It's not crazy the where it's at right now, but I think it does have some potential. So really what we're looking for 8-Rack to have would be some additional good discard cards. Cards such as, Mind Twist, Hymn to Torok. I think Hymn to Torok is too good for Modern, but you guys already know my opinions on Mind Twist. I've basically wrote an entire paragraph in the section, or in the comment section of last video, on my thoughts about Mind Twist. But again, just good spells for good black spells for 8-Rack would be super nice. Another 2 cards to kind of take into consideration would be Diabolic Edict and Innocent Blood. Innocent Blood, much more than Diabolic Edict, would help out the deck a lot more. I think Diabolic Edict would be better for the format overall because it slots into multiple decks, but for 8-Rack in particular, Innocent Blood is significantly better. Innocent Blood says it's 1 black mana, each player sacrifices a creature. So what ends up happening with 8-Rack is you draw them out of resources to the point where they're playing 1 spell a turn, maybe it's a creature, and we play 0 creatures in the deck aside from Mutavaults in the main, and then a couple of sideboard cards like this one. I had Gifted Aetherborns and 1 Gurmag Angler as my only creatures in the entire 75. So it works out very well. It basically says it's basically 1 mana for a sorcery. Target opponent sacrifices a creature because you're never going to have a creature to sacrifice. So it ends up working out super good for this deck. It would be a nice little improvement for the removal suite to have in this deck, and I think it would be a fantastic inclusion for Modern Horizons, as well as just for the 8-Rack deck, because I think Innocent Blood can slot into a few different strategies, but 8-Rack would by far be the deck that takes on that role the best of being an Innocent Blood deck. Next deck we're going to talk about here would be Bant Eldrazi. Bant Eldrazi is a deck that has kind of fallen by the wayside. A lot of the Eldrazi decks have kind of become Eldrazi-tron at this point, or maybe like the free win Eldrazi decks that are trying to run like Serum Powder to get like these crazy draws where they'll have chalices in their decks too. Those sort of decks. I'm not really a huge fan of those decks in particular, but I do really like the Eldrazi cards, and I think that they're in a great spot. Getting to play Ancient Stirrings would be, Ancient Stirrings is a fantastic card, so I think being an Ancient Stirrings deck is definitely something to take into consideration when talking about the Bant Eldrazi list. And then Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher are, again, just fantastic cards. Having access to, or is it Eldrazi Temples, is crazy. One of the only lands, if not the only land in Modern, that actually taps for 2 mana. So again, very good, and when I say that, I mean by itself. Of course, you can add on like a Utopia Sprawl to a land or something like that, but on its own, Eldrazi Temple is one of the only ones. This list here looks like it's from just a couple days ago, March 5th, 2019, so it does look like it's maybe going to start showing up again. I kind of doubt it. I think again it needs some more relevant pieces. But it is kind of hard to kind of determine what relevant pieces Bant Eldrazi would need. It's very limited to what it can play because, of course, you're an Eldrazi deck, so basically everything you're trying to play should have the Eldrazi creature type, and I'm not sure we're going to see any new Eldrazi printed from Modern Horizons. I would be very surprised to see that, and there's no previous Eldrazi that aren't already Modern legal that could come back and become Modern legal and make a difference to things. So I'm not really sure what cards could be added to Bant Eldrazi to make it into a better deck. but I would like to see there be something. Again, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe the addition of more fast mana. I know a lot of people are speculating on all sorts of cards that we've heard, Ancient Tomb and all these other Ancient Tomb, City of Traders, those sort of lands. I don't think City of Traders is. I'm pretty sure City of Traders is on the reserve list. But anyway, those kind of cards that can also help you produce mana faster. Lotus Petal, even. Just anything essentially to help you be able to ramp out a bigger creature like Thanasia, Reality Smasher, Drowner of Hope much sooner than the turns that you would normally be able to find it. Another good inclusion, actually now that I think about it, a fantastic inclusion to this deck that could actually be in Modern Horizons would be something like Crop Rotation. Crop Rotation allows you to sacrifice your it's 1 green, allows you to sacrifice a land as an additional cost, and then you can search your library for a land, put it onto the battlefield. And so that would allow you to find your Eldrazi temples even better than you would be able to normally. So your spell package would probably look something like 4 Ancient Stirrings, maybe cut down on a path or 2, maybe cut it to then 2 crop rotations, and then if you're running crop rotation, you also get access to utility lands as well. So you could think about since you can search up those lands significantly easier, maybe instead of 4 Cavern of Souls, you could run maybe 2 Cavern of Souls instead because it's easier to find those Cavern of Souls. And then you could use those other 2 slots to run some sort of a utility land that would be colorless. I can't really think of anything right now. I know back in Standard, something like the Blighted Lands would have been fine. For Modern, I don't think the Blighted Lands are where you want to be. I think maybe Blighted Fen could be okay, but that one's black. The list would be Banned Eldrazi, so you couldn't really play the black Blighted Land. But there are a ton of colorless lands that you could potentially play. Since the deck doesn't use the graveyard at all, you could run Moorland Haunt, I think is what the card is called. Let me just, or maybe not Moorland Haunt. The land that creates spirits. Moorland Haunt? Maybe it is Moorland Haunt? Yeah, so exile a creature card from your graveyard, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield for a white and a blue. So this would be something you could crop rotation for. Since your deck doesn't use the graveyard at all, that would be a nice little card for you to be able to search up occasionally. Would be a decent little mana sink as well, so something you could search for there. Again, I don't think that there's a ton of cards that could really help this out too much in Modern Horizons, but Crop Rotation could potentially be one. However, Crop Rotation would also hurt the format a little bit more by making something like Tron a lot better too. So again, there are plus sides and downsides. So the positives and negatives. So I'm not sure, but I would like to see Banned Eldrazi get a little bit better with Modern Horizons. Next deck we're going to take a look at here is Martyr Proc, which is a deck that's actually kind of not in the worst spot right now because Burn is very relevant in the field. Even Phoenix has like an okay matchup against Phoenix, nothing too crazy against it, but against Burn for sure, this deck is just fantastic. The deck is basically a mono-white life gain control sort of thing that runs small creatures and grinds you out over the course of the game. It has effects like Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, those sort of things, but then also is just at heart a Serra Ascendant Martyr of Sands deck to try and get above 30 life as early as turn 2, and then just dome your opponent with a 6/6 lifelink flyer again as early as turn 2. If they don't have the Fatal Push or maybe a Lightning Bolt to interact with the Serra Ascendant at all, then that's quite a bit of damage coming your way as early as turn 2, which is quite good. And then just things like Squadron Hawk fills your hand for the Martyr of Sands, Thraben Inspector, good little value creature, Ranger of Eos, a nice little way to find your Martyr of Sands. And then aside from that, you're basically just trying to stay alive long enough to win the game with your Serra Ascendants and maybe even Squad Hawk beatdowns. So I would like to see this deck receive some fantastic cards like Recruiter of the Guard. I think is a fantastic card that could definitely help out this deck. So let me bring that one up. Recruiter of the Guard. From Conspiracy, take the crown here. Why did that not work? Recruiter of the Guard. And there we go. Recruiter of the Guard here from Conspiracy. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So again, this card finds literally anything you want in the Martyr deck. Could find you your Ranger of Eos if you wanted it, could find you your Martyr if you wanted it. Basically anything that you want to find in the deck, maybe even your sideboard creatures too. If you have something like an Auriok champion in the sideboard that you need to tutor up, then that would be something you could do as well. So I think that that's probably the card that would help out Mono White Martyr the most. But at the same time, there maybe could be some other cards that aren't yet seen that could also impact Martyr quite a bit too, because in order to see play in Martyr, it's not like there's a restriction like we have on the other list. Like when we talk about Merfolk, you kind of need to have the creature type Merfolk to be relevant for this. When we talk about Bant Eldrazi, you really want to be an Eldrazi to be relevant so that the Eldrazi temples can maximize getting a chance to play you. But for Mono White Martyr, all the card needs to be is white. So it's pretty easy to just look at any white card and then think maybe this could have a slot in Martyr. And so I think that if we take a look at some of these white cards in Modern Horizons, we might be able to find a card or two for the Martyr archetype, which would then make it a little bit better, which I'm again hoping that Martyr does get a little bit better with Modern Horizons. Final deck we're going to take a look at here is Blue-Black Control. This is a deck that I have played against quite a lot, haven't gotten a chance to pilot quite yet, but I very much would like to at some point in the future. I've seen a lot of different games with Blue-Black Control. Very known player for playing Blue-Black Control, Yuta Takahashi, also known for the Fairies archetype as well, which this is kind of similar to a Fairies deck. It does have the 4 Bitter Blossoms in the main here, so it's kind of like a Fairies deck. It's listed more as Blue-Black Control, but the list that I would like to play would be something where Baleful Strix becomes legal. And then you just use Baleful Strix as a nice grindy card to, help you out early in the game with stabilizing against some of these crazy starts that other decks may have, and then you could take over the game later on with Jace the Mind Sculptor, Liliana of the Veil, whatever you want, Snapcasters for just additional value, and then maybe some beatdowns, Creeping Tar Pits to just slowly get in for 3 to win you the game once you've officially taken it over, something like that. So again, cards that would be very relevant for this would be the kind of cards like Counterspell that we've already talked about for Blue-White Control, which again, Blue-White Control right now is just the dominant control deck in Modern, and that's not really saying much because Blue-White Control right now isn't really in the best spot either. So having an additional control deck to choose from, whether you want to be Blue-White or Blue-Black, I think could be pretty beneficial to the format, especially if Counterspell gets reprinted. It makes it more likely that someone would be willing to try something like this Blue-Black list, where you would get access to Counterspell, again, at the 2-mana slot, and then maybe even access to some of these other blue and black cards that we're talking about getting, reprinted, or, again, even new cards that get printed as well. I think cards like Baleful Strix, of course, fit directly into this archetype, probably even just take the spots of the 4 Spellstutter sprites, maybe cut out the Bitter Blossoms, cut the Spellstutter sprites for the Baleful Strix, and then maybe throw in a Gurmag Angler too, something like that, just another big beater to kind of finish the game too, and you could have a very sweet deck put together, and it would be something that I would definitely like to try out for Modern as soon as Modern Horizons comes out. And again, that's assuming we get some good pieces for Blue-Black Control, especially Baleful Strix and Counterspell and those sort of cards that would be lower on the converted mana cost spectrum. So again, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Again, these are 5 Modern decks that I hope get better with Modern Horizons. We're talking about Merfolk, 8-Rack, Bant Eldrazi, Mono White Martyr, or Martyr Proc, whatever you want to call it, and then finally Blue-Black Control for Modern. So again, hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. Let me know what decks down low in the comments section you want to see get better with Modern Horizons. Maybe you agree with me on some of these decks, that maybe it would be nice to see them go from a Tier 2, Tier 3 deck up to a Tier 1, Tier 1.5 kind of deck. I think it would be pretty sweet. The more 1.5 to 1 tier decks that we have in the format, I think the better. So again, let me know what decks you want to see get better in Modern from Modern Horizons down low in the comment section. If you guys did enjoy the video, a like would be appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, and I'll see you guys here next time. Thank you all so much for watching today's video where we talked about 5 Modern decks that I hope get better with Modern Horizons. At the end of each video, I love to give a huge shout out and thank you to my patrons over on the Patreon page. So huge shout out and thank you to Hayden, also known as Down Under MTG, Nicole, also known as Badwolf MTG, Jason, Jeremy, and Rodrigo for supporting me over on the Patreon page. The support greatly, greatly appreciated, and I'll see you guys here next time.